Hi everybody and welcome back to KGC and to the second day of our bodywork repairs on our mini project. Now my plan for today is to try and get this first inner wing actually fully welded in. So I'm going to go through and hopefully answer some of the questions that some of you guys left on the previous video where I can. If not, they'll be answered on the next video. So nothing more than to quite simply let's get stuck into it. Right, now you might be wondering why I've removed the inner wing before marking any of it out, and that is quite simply because we need to actually remove another panel first, and that is this boxing panel here. Because if we try and put the inner wing on first, we're then not going to be able to replace that boxing panel any easier. So it makes logical sense to cut it out now and then put its decent replacement panel on and then put the inner wing on top of that so it all fits in together. Now you can probably also see here that the parcel shelf area here is quite corroded. In fact, not a lot of it there. I will repair that later. I'll actually make a piece up later once we've got the inner wing in so that we can get the shape of it right. And what I'll do is I'll make up like a card template. I'll make out of like an old cereal packet or something like that, cut it to shape so that it's going to fit, and then use that to make up a piece of metal to then weld and put in there. So to answer one of the questions which came through earlier off the previous video, was what do we do about the spot welds and how do we get rid of them when removing a panel. Now if I just grab the camera a minute, I'll hopefully be able to show you what the spot welds look like on this panel that we're going to be taking apart. So this is the A-post on the driver's side of the right hand drive car, and you can see all these little marks here. These are the spot welds. So 9 times out of 10 they are fairly easy to identify, and if you wanted to highlight them a bit, you can just grab a marker pen or a Sharpie or something like that and quite simply just colour in where they are so that you can see them a bit better. Now because we've had this shell acid dipped and it's just basically got a grey, battleship grey primer on it, it does show the spot welds a lot easier than a car that's perhaps still in its painted state. So you might not be able to necessarily always see them. As well as that, if the area is particularly corroded, like the sill joiner here, you can't actually tell where the spot welds are because it's just so corroded. It's nigh on impossible to see. You can sometimes make out the marks, but it's very difficult to see exactly where they are to cut them out to remove the panel. Now there's different ways of actually cutting the panels out, and for a long time I've basically just gone along and gone in with the angle grinder and cut around the areas, which is what I did here for cutting out the inner wing, and you can sort of see there's like little square marks and where I've ground the welds down and it's perhaps gone a little bit deep. But you can actually buy, which I've only just discovered, you can actually buy spot weld cutters which will literally, if you use a centre punch and punch the centre of the spot weld, you can then use it and it'll literally just cut a mini hole around the spot weld so that the panel will remove itself, leaving the spot weld in place, which you then grind back later. So I'm going to invest in one of those because I've never used one before, which is quite surprising really, given how many years I've been doing this, and see how it goes on some of the other panels on this, see if it speeds up the process or not. But anyway, back to today. My plan is, as I said, to cut this boxing panel out, and what I'm going to do is measure up from behind the bottom of the dash and the parcel shelf and then from the parcel shelf to the floor. So that we make sure that the parcel shelf goes back in the right place and that the boxing panel fits in the right place. So I'm going to crack on with that and back on time lapse. Right, now I've got the old boxing panel cut out, as you saw. It did take quite a bit to get it out, and also you'll notice now that the parcel shelf is a little bit wobbly. I did take measurements, so I know that I can get it back in the right place when we come to weld it to the new panel. Now, one of the other questions that was asked on the previous video was how do we make sure that the new panels that go in correctly, in all 3 dimensions, and basically it depends. A lot of it depends on how good the panels are. You can get some panels for some cars which are absolutely awful, and you have to cut them and make them fit. Others, generally like the ones for the Mini, are pretty good. So you don't need to do much alteration, if any, with some of them. In particular, I seem to have noticed over the years that the panels that do fit are generally off cars where you can still get new body shells made for them, so the likes of the Mini, the MGBs, and cars like that. Because they make every single panel for them to fit their body shells, when they put the body shells together, the panels generally are pretty much spot on and made off the original moulds, so they're going to fit quite well. Yes, you can get pattern replacement ones, but those ones I never buy, because every single time I have done in the past, they have been worthless. It was easier in some cases to actually make my own than to use the supplied panels. So where you can, I'd always say try and get the best panels that you can. I know it's not always possible, because a lot of cars you can't get the panels for, so they have to be made, or they're made bespoke or on one-off, so they're not made particularly brilliantly, but they'll do the job. So it is one of those that you do have to be careful of. So when it comes to lining panels up, you need to make sure that you have taken measurements if you have nothing to line it up to. I mean, I've still got a bit of the A-post left, and some people will probably be shouting and screaming at this right now, saying, well, why has he not braced the car at the moment? Well, I've not braced it because I've got nothing to brace to, quite simply, but there's enough metal left that I'm doing this a bit at a time, so it's not going to cause any detrimental effects. When we come to replace the floors, because we'll have the new A-posts in, the front wings will be on, and all the work at the back end will be done, there's some strength there that I can then brace the car across the door gaps and everything like that. So when I come to actually start fitting the inner wing later, I will be getting a door out to make sure that the door still fits in a hole, because I can alter it if I need to make sure it does fit. So how do we get these panels in? Well, for this particular panel, it goes in here, like so. Now it does need a little bit of adjustment, but this is actually quite a good fitting panel. It needs to go up a bit. All I'm trying to do is line it up off this edge here, on the A-post, the join where the old boxing panel was joined. I'm trying to line it up to that, and then once I have got it aligned and I'm quite happy with how it's looking, which is actually pretty much there, I then just get a welding clamp, I can grab hold of it, and just sort of, particularly with this one, just sort of somewhere in the middle, or I will do, when I've adjusted the clamp to fit. So let's try again. I'm quite sure everybody has done this before. So we get it in, get it lined up, make sure it's in nice where we want it, and then, like I say, clamp it up to hold it in place. So the other area that needs to be welded is at the top here. So again, I can add another clamp up there. I'll just use a set of mole grips, and that's held in place there. So before I actually, I could do another one down the bottom there. As you can see, it's just pinging out of it. So I'm just going to grab another clamp and just chuck that on the bottom. One of those that, if truth be told, you can never have too many clamps to hold bits together. So there we are. So that's all held in the right place now. So my first task will be to grab my tape measure and measure out where this partial shelf is going to be. Now it has dropped a bit, so we know it's going to have to come a bit higher. So if I measure that out, so we wanted that's 6¼ from that point there. And all I'm doing is just marking out the area that the parcel shelf is going to. Why am I marking it out? Well, I'm marking that out so that I know where to weld it. That's why I took measurements before, so I can then hold it back in place once I clean the panel up, and I can then also just make sure that the area is clean for it to go in, and then once I've got the panel held in position, I can weld it. It's going to hold that there, and that panel will then be in. Now, if I had the A-post piece and the sill piece to go in now, which obviously I haven't at the moment, then I would probably put, and I probably will end up putting the holes for the plug welds along there. So if I was welding the boxing panel to the A-post, I'd weld it through there whilst I've got it all together. But as I've now marked that out for where I want it to go, I can now declamp it, knowing that, right, I've got 3 clamps to hold that in place. And then I can now prep the panel up now. And by doing the prep work on it, basically all I need to do is just get rid of the black coating that it's got on it, get it back to bare metal, so that when I come to weld it, it's going to weld. There's going to be something there for it to actually spark up and weld to. So I'll get this cleaned up, and if anybody knows a trick to get rid of the stickers, do let me know. Right, now I've got my boxing panel back in position now. It's all prepared, ready for the small bits of welding that are needed on it to attach it to the inside of the top of the A-post there, and also to get our parcel shelf in position. Now I've added in a magnetic welding clamp on the underside of the parcel shelf just to hold it in the height position where we want it, because otherwise it's just going to flap about and it's not going to get in the right position. So obviously now I just need to get some weld on it, and then we can actually start looking at getting the inner wing in, which is obviously today's main task. Right, so I've got our boxing panel in place now, and the parcel shelf is also in the correct position, so that's all good. And there's obviously there's not a lot of strength in this yet, because obviously we need the inner wing on there and the A-post to get the true strength back in there, but it is on there. It's not really going to go anywhere. And one thing that this is an ideal position to see is that when you come to do any welding, you need to look and see your weld penetration at the back if you can, or any marks on the outside, because if you get a good weld penetration, you know that you've got a good weld. It's one of those things. You can have a really nice looking weld on the top, but it could be, it could snap dead easily, which is why preparation work, which is why I shined up the panel beforehand, always helps with that. Having good clean metal to work with is always a good thing when it comes to any type of welding. So going forwards with this now, I'm just going to remove this clamp, because we are also welded in at the top up here, so that's fine, because now it's time to start looking at getting our inner wing fitted, test fitted into position, so we can mark out where we're going to need to drill it for our plug welds. So I'll just have a bit of a tidy up, make a bit of space, and we can start looking at getting this inner wing in. Rightio then, so the inner wing is now pretty much wedged in position, so it's holding itself, is what I mean by that. You can see here, this bit will pull in with a clamp, so that's going to tie up nicely there, which will also help bring the bottom in down here, so that's going to line up nicely. So when we look on the inside, you might, hopefully if the light's decent enough, you can see how the wing is pretty good match to the original along the bottom there, and that will probably go in a little bit more with nudge with a hammer or some clamps or something. Again, once we pull that top bit in there, it'll pull this section in here to go up to the inside part of the window frame, but we won't be welding that bit in just yet. We'll do that when we put the new one of those in. So the other areas that we can clamp this up is this area here where we have the top mount for the suspension. That will bolt on there and pull the whole wing in to the inner framework around here. So that'll help pull that in, and again we can get some clamps in on these edges down here to hold that, and again on this front edge there, and then we can sort of look at the very front of the panel, which is obviously down here where it attaches to the front panel itself, in these two areas here. So what I'm going to do is get top mount back on here to get that in the right place, and then get some more clamps in and hold it all in place so that we can see that it is all coming together really nicely and everything's lining up, because even the joints here have lined up pretty well as well, going along there. So that's really looking positive, that this is going to come out pretty damn good. Right, so we've now got the wing clamped and bolted in place. Everything has lined up really well with it. So to mark out where we're going to do our plug welds, the easiest way to do it, whilst it's all clamped up like this, is literally a Sharpie marker pen and just go around anywhere where there is a seam joint, so anywhere that you had to cut out before, next to the following panel, just go around and literally just draw around it, and then you can work out from there when you take the panel off, whereabouts you actually need to put your plug welds in. So I'll crack on with that, and then we can see about getting it all marked up and drilled out. Right, so we've now got our inner wing. I've just got it on the bench here, and we can see where I've marked out around the joints. There's quite a few on this side and there's a couple on the other, and basically that is going to be the place where we're going to be obviously needing to drill holes to weld it. So the basic rule I have is I will go down the middle where I can see, if I can see both sides, I'll go right down the middle and then mark out perhaps every inch or so with a ½ inch from the end, and then every inch, and that'll be essentially where we are going to drill it for welding. So let's take this one along here, which goes from the back of the bulkhead. It's the back of the bulkhead up there, and that's the front of it there. So we're coming up from the rear arch up there. So just basically just running down the middle. It doesn't have to be superbly accurate, as long as you're sort of in the middle of it. And then with a tape measure, quite simply, I'm just going to mark out first a ½ inch, and then every inch from there. Where we get to like a crossroads, where we've got several joints coming together, I'll usually do one right in the middle once I've marked out where the others are. So again, ½ inch from the bottom, and then up every inch or so from there, and that's going to sort of land in the same place kind of around there. So I'm going to continue marking that out. Once we've actually got it marked out, so once we've got them done like that, it's quite simple to then just get a centre punch and your hammer, and you just literally go along and mark out each and every crossroads that you've put in. And just keep going around, get them all done, and then where you've put your centre punch is where you're going to be drilling. Right, now that I've marked out everywhere that I'm going to drill, and I've centre punched them all as well. And to drill it, obviously, we need a couple of drill bits. Now, I'll usually start off with a 3.5 or 4 mil at most pilot hole, but the actual size I'll usually go to is about 6 or 7 mil. Purely because that gives you enough room to get a decent weld area in there, and it's not that much bigger than a normal spot weld, which of course is the idea, is that we're trying to replicate the look of a spot weld here. Now, if you wanted, yes, you could seam weld everything together. It's you're more than capable of having that done, but it doesn't then look quite right when it's assessed by experts and so on. And also then in the future, if you ever need to replace the panel again because it's rusted away after a good many years out on the road, then you've then got to cut through a big seam weld rather than a dozen or more plug welds, which again is a lot easier to do. So I prefer to do plug welding than seam welding. Seam welding does have its place, and we do a bit on the cars when required, but generally overall, if we can plug weld it together, we will do, because essentially that is very similar to how the cars were put together in the first place. So I'm going to crack on with the drill, get all the holes drilled, and then we can see about actually getting it back in there, all clamped up again, all lined up as well, and we can hopefully get it fire up the welder and start gluing it together. Right, well, as you've just seen, I've spent the last 40 minutes or so drilling our panel, and what I've done as well is just run the power file over where I have drilled to create some shiny spots, but also to deburr it so that it can fit as flat against the other bits where it's going to be welded as it possibly can, because we don't really want anything in the way there, because we want to make sure that we have some good joints. So I'm going to get this all clamped up again, make sure everything is lined up, and I'll double check absolutely everything, and then at long last we can see about getting some weld on it. Right, so the inner wing is now all clamped in place, and we are pretty much ready to weld. However, when we get parts like, say, here, you can sort of see there's a bit of a gap behind some of these places where we're going to put some plug welds in. There's an easy way to solve this problem, and it will make it easier going through the whole process, and that is to actually drill an extra hole through where it's raised, and then we can either put a nut and bolt in if we can get in there, or we put a screw in place. Once we then weld the two around it, so for instance, if we were going to we needed to weld this section up here, let's say, we'd say, right, let's put a screw in that one, and one up here somewhere. We could then weld every other one, then that will hold everything in place, so it's all tightened up. We can then remove the screws and weld right through, including filling up the hole that we've created with the screw or the nut and bolt. And it's a really good way of just making sure that everything is in place where you want it to be, and is also up nice and tight, especially if you just can't quite get the clamps in the right place, to hold it in situ where you want it to be. So that's a really nice little handy technique. I'm going to very quickly go through now and just see where I need to do it, because I'm going to do it a section at a time, this, and I'll probably drill and screw the panels together, weld it all up, and then move on to the next section, and just keep on just working through it like that. But as you saw in the quick time lapse then, the top wing fits on quite well, fits on very well actually, so everything is in the right place. It's all going to go together nice now, and we can finally get some weld on it. Well, that's welded on. So if we try to fit the wing, you can see straight away that it has gone on absolutely perfect. All the panel joins for it have all lined up really nice. So that gives me great confidence that everything is lined up where it's supposed to be. And obviously, I took my time and made sure, I took measurements earlier to make sure everything was, going to go correct anyway. And I know that it is. So, really, I've probably got to spend perhaps another half day or so tidying up the welds. That's what I want to do next, is to tidy up the plug welds, get them ground down as best we can, just to get it all back fairly smooth so it's nice and tidy. There'll be a few places where I need to add a few more welds here and there, such as the joints here between the front panel and the inner wing. Ooh, it's a bit warm still. And a few other places like that. So really that's going to be, you know, the next task on this. I'll probably couple that in with getting the A-post and the top of the sill section in, because I really would quite like to get that in, I think, to give us a bit more strength around the A-post area. The alternative would be perhaps to put a couple of screws through the A-post that's there to our new panel, but I don't really want to do that if I can avoid it. Otherwise, I may make a start on the other side. I'm not going to fit the top outer wing properly yet, and the reason for that is because the front scuttle panel here comes down and goes underneath it, so I want to make sure that I can get to weld the area needed there, so that it's done correctly, and also so that I can actually get in there to weld, because obviously it's, with the wing on, it makes it a little bit difficult to do. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to give us a good old thumbs up. Also make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss the next video in this series or any of the others that I decide to get around to doing. So until next time, happy classic motoring.